Tadassa, but you probably know me better as Esther. I'm only a teenager, but it feels like I have packed a whole lot of living into these few short years. Shall I tell you my story? I was an orphan. I had no mother or father. I mean, I did, and I have these vague memories. I remember my dad tossing me in the air, and I remember my mother singing me songs about the wonders of Yahweh. But they died. And I was really lucky because my cousin Mordecai, he took me in. I mean, he didn't have to. He really didn't, but he did. He was a kind man. Maybe a little grumpy on the outside, a little gruff, but I know that he cares for me. And I'm grateful for the home he gave me. There are a lot that weren't as lucky. In fact, when we would go to the market, we'd see them. People, young people, begging for just scraps. Mordecai, when he'd go past them, he kind of slipped them a piece of bread or some fruit, grumbling the whole time. But I know that underneath he's really super. I was just young when I realized that people looked at me differently. I thought it was because I was an orphan, that I was that different. But one day, a friend explained to me that it was because I was so uncommonly beautiful that people stared at me. I mean, I had seen my reflection in the well water, and I had 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, just like anyone else. But apparently people saw me differently. People thought I was beautiful. And this became a really important part of my story. One day when I was a young teenager, the king's guards came to the village, and we were terrified. We were frightened. They were looking for all the young women, those who were unmarried. They were rounding them up, and we didn't know what they wanted, but Mordecai did. Mordecai knew, and he thought he would hide me. But I guess he was too well known, or I was too well known, and they looked until they found me. And they were taking us to the palace to meet with the king's favor. That's what they said. I may be young, but I'm not naive. I knew what that meant, and I was terrified. He was looking for a new wife because he'd thrown the old one out. Queen Vashti. You know, I feel sorry for her. She was the king's wife for a long time, and there was a lot of gossip in the market about what happened to her. It seems that the king, Xerxes, was having a party. It was a big party. It was a long party. It was 7 days. And he had wealthy people and important people from countries all around. They just came and they stayed for 7 days. And during that 7 days, they ate and they drank a lot. And he wanted to show off his palace. He wanted to show off everything that he had, all his possessions, all his beautiful things. And he ended up wanting to show off his wife. It seems that on the very last night, very late, when the king had drank a whole lot, and so had everybody else, that he decided he wanted to show off his most prized possession. And he wanted them to bring Vashti out. He sent his eunuchs, his guards, the ones that looked after the women, he sent them in to get Vashti. He said, I want her to be in her best robe. I want a crown on her head. I want her makeup to be beautiful. It was the middle of the night. And he sent this decree. He wanted everyone to stare at her, to look at her, to want her, to parade her before a bunch of drunken men just to show off his beautiful possession. she refused to go. I don't know where she found the courage, but she wouldn't go. She wouldn't do what the king asked, and he was furious. In fact, my neighbor's mama said he threw a royal temper tantrum. He talked to his royal advisors. I'm sure they were drunk too. And what they said was, get rid of her. And more than that, okay, are you ready for this? They said to him, and make a decree throughout the land that all men are to be the head of their household. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine that they would do a law for that. I felt sorry for Vashti. Just because she didn't want to be paraded around like a prize sheep in front of lecherous drunken men, she was cast out. And now the king wanted a new wife. That's where I come in. They were rounding up all these girls throughout the whole country. There were 127 provinces. And we all knew. We heard stories of the royal party, and we were sure that we would be the next one. We thought we would be taken immediately before the king. But that wasn't the case. We had to stay there for a whole year. A whole year. I just wanted to go home. But no. We had a year of beauty treatments and being taught royal etiquette and what we should do and what we shouldn't do and what fork went where and how we should please the king and how we should never, ever refuse the king. I mean, we knew the story of Vashti and we knew why we shouldn't refuse the king. And during this time, I made friends with a lot of the young girls that were there. There were a lot who were really homesick. And I came alongside them. And I heard that Mordecai came every single day to the courtyard to see how I was, to make sure, to try and intervene for my care. Most of the girls were really frightened. They were scared. And we would talk about all the things we should and shouldn't do. And they were scared of the eunuch, Haggai. He was a big guy, and he was scary looking, but you know what? He was always super nice to me. We talked about all kinds of things, and I guess because we talked, he started to show me a little favoritism. I got 7 servants. He moved me to the nicest place in the whole harem. And then, when we were properly prepared, then we would go and be paraded in front of the king like a one-person beauty pageant, made to walk up and down before him so he could decide if he liked the looks of us. If he was happy with you, then you were sent to another part of the harem, the special part. It was like the semifinals of the beauty pageant. And I was taken there. And it was a really different place there. There were women that I had known before, but they were acting so differently. They were nasty. These, the most beautiful women in the land, were very ugly with each other. They were nasty, and especially to me, because Haggai favored me. They'd play tricks on each other. They'd speak nasty, harsh things to one another, hateful words, and they would hope that the king would not choose the other. This competition of sorts had turned them into people that I knew deep down they really weren't. The crown became such an important goal for them that they turned away from the people that they were on the inside. It made me sad. I just wanted to go home. And then came that day, that fateful day when the king chose the one who would be queen. And it was me, Esther, Hadassah, a Jewish peasant girl who became queen of Persia. Beauty is a subjective thing, isn't it? As we listen to this first part of Esther's story, we see beauty in its many forms, and conversely, we see ugliness too. Mordecai, my Esther, described him as a little crusty, but underneath we see a heart of gold. Yes, I've taken a little artistic license here, but I want you to consider that for a man, an unmarried man, to take in a young girl, a kinswoman even, would not have profited him much. A young boy, totally different story. But a young girl, no. Not only would have to care for her, but there would be the added expense of a dowry and making sure that she got married off. But he does it. And by all accounts, he shows that he really cares for her. Cares enough to want to keep her safe. And even after she's in the palace, he still tries to intervene on her behalf. So, there's beauty on the inside, with a sheen of gruffness and unpleasantness on the outside. And then we have King Xerxes, a man of prestige and power and influence, had every advantage that you could possibly want, who by all accounts had no reason to court the admiration of others. But still he does. He threw this big party, not for the benefit of his guests, but to show off. His ego was so great that he felt he needed to gloat. And in his drunkenness, thought to belittle the woman who was his wife. In a matter befitting of no one, let alone a king, he shook her out of her sleep and asked her to strut before a room full of drunken colleagues. I think we can agree on the ugliness that's evident there. And that wife, who had everything to lose, showed her courage and self-confidence, which is certainly a thing of beauty, by refusing to submit to this degradation. And finally, we see the women in the harem. Yes, I'm giving them character that is not in the text, but I think that we can agree that this would be pretty close to the truth. If you have come from a place of poverty and have been plucked up and placed somewhere where you have a shot at wealth and privilege, there are many that would do whatever it takes to attain that spot. Many of us have watched this same Esther story unfold if you've watched The Bachelor. Women are placed in a position where they're competing for the rose or the ring or whatever, this chance to be married to a man who is usually really good looking and is chosen because of his wealth and his privilege. And it often deteriorates into this mental, physical, verbal brawl amongst these women. This ugliness that is underneath comes to the